Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty, and it's time to take another art break. I'm going to be showing you how I created this whimsical style scarecrow. I'm going to break the steps down a little bit of how I created his face, and then I'm going to walk you step by step of how I do the watercolor steps. If you enjoyed doing whimsical art, here's the little character that we did last week, and this little guy is going to share the pumpkin patch with this gal. Well, let's get started. I can't wait to show you the steps of how to create this whimsical style scarecrow. I'll begin with just kind of a little simple drawing tutorial of how to kind of draw his face, line it up, and then I will go into the watercolor steps. So to create his little face, he's got that little sweet face of those bigger eyes. They're setting a little bit farther off on his face. This is very rounded, so that's going to help give it that child quality or innocent look to him, that really kind of cute factor. So you're going to basically kind of start out with that little rounded face shape. We're gonna start here. I'll draw this a little bigger so you can see what you're doing. And then you're just gonna go down the center because that's where your nose will be lined up, and just make a little bit of a cross here. So this will be the line dividing up of where your face is going to be. So the nose is going to be a chopped off kind of a triangle. So if you figured this would be a triangle shape, it's going to be a little wider at the top, come down. And then the top is just chopped off. Come off to the side and make these big round eyes. That's what's going to give it that real kind of charming little innocent look. Now, depending on where you do the upper part of his eye determines which way he's looking. So if you want him to look more up, you would draw the circles at the top. If you would like it to look more off to the side, you would do your circles more like off to the side. So would be changing the direction. So now he's looking off to that direction, and you can do it whatever which way you would like. And then to do the little smile, I started here and then just do the little smile like that. Super sweet and super cute. Now let's talk a little bit about how you do the hat. You want to do the hat that's going to go over his forehead. So you're going to come down a little ways, and then I just do kind of a gentle swoop and then come back up. So it's not it's just a gradual little line. Then to make it look like the hat is going around, you're going to have this little mark here like that, and then this little mark here like that. Then you just come up, off to the side. Here's the part of the hat. You're going to come up, give it a little bend, and then come back around. So cute. Now to do looks like it's got more of a hat band or setting, like you see more of this front part of your hat. It's going to swoop down. You're going to put the bottom part of your band here and then the next line up. So then this becomes, here I'll open it up a little bit so you can see. That becomes more of a hat band that looks like it's going around. So you'll have this space right here and be here. That's going to drop down. That's going to give you a little bit more room. Oops, and I need to switch this angle here. This has got to come out this way, if we look at it that way. So this is going to drop down, come around. Look at it as kind of like adding a little ear, I guess. And then this one will come this way. Kind of like adding a little ear to your hat. And then you would just go ahead and add your straw hat or your straw hair on there. This little bird is super cute. If you figure you do a round circle, so he's looking down. And then this is going to come out to the side here, come out this way. So little C shapes back and forth like that. And then for the tail, all you're going to do is come up, make a W shape for the tail. And then to make it look like it's looking down more, put a little beak here. And that's how you're going to draw that cute little guy that's looking down. So that's how you do a simple little face part of the scarecrow and build it that way. I do have a sketchbook membership. For those who are members, they will get the tracer for the line drawing to do that. I know not everyone likes to draw, so I can do the drawing part, and then you can go ahead and trace it. Use a light box and then trace over it. I'll have a link down inside of the comments for the tracer for the sketchbook membership. It's very reasonably priced, easy to join, and I so thank you for all of the people who have decided to join and support my channel that way. So appreciate you doing so. Now, once you've gotten it traced and your lines, I always recommend tracing in pencil right away, and then using a kneadable eraser is what you want to use, is a kneadable eraser. And what that can do is that can go over your pencil work. Like say your pencil work got a little too dark, you want to lift up some lines of the graphite, That's what you're going to use as a kneaded eraser. It'll pick up the graphite, but it won't smear it around on your paper, and it works perfect for lightening your pencil marks when you're doing watercolor. Works great for that. I'm working on the Arches 100% cotton paper, and I'll have links for some of the things that I use, and the Arches watercolor paper works great for doing those soft watercolor blends. That's how I'm getting this real soft, pretty look on his clothes, his face. It's because of the paper. And often I use a student grade paper, but I'm using my watercolor, my 100% Arches watercolor more often because, you know, I've had that pad forever, and I need to take my own voice and say life is short, use the good art materials. And so I'm going to start using my Arches watercolor paper even more. Now, to begin my set, I have a set of an inexpensive set of student grade watercolor, and I've already sprayed it. And then I also have a little bit more professional grade, the Rubens over here. And tonight I'm also going to be using a few little tube paints that I have. These are the Marie ones, and I'm using them, and this colors, I'm mixing my own. So like Viridian, white, of course, I have that. And then the Payne's Gray, and a little bit of emerald green. It does not look that way. Emerald green is a super bright color, but I'm going to be mixing my own colors and creating some of my own colors from my tube paint. So I'm going to be starting the watercolor steps, and I'm going to begin with his face. I'm going to be using this lighter kind of peachy tone color to start out with. This color has a lot of white in it and kind of functions like almost like a gouache in a way. It's a little bit more opaque, so I'm watering it down to, about tea consistency. So I have quite a bit of water in there, and I'm going to start painting his face. I'm going to want to go around his eyes, leaving those center eyes for rooms to put the color of what I want to make his face. I can go next to his nose. Watercolor has that unique property. It won't flow wherever the paper is dry. It will want to flow wherever the paper is wet. So I'm trying to keep it in the areas, and I just went into his eye. Just when I told you not to try to keep out of the eye, I just went in there. I couldn't see it. The water was glaring with the lights, and so I couldn't see exactly where it was. So we'll find out. We can try to fix it. I can come in, rinse my brush out, give it a squeeze, and then I can kind of try to lift some of that color if I can, to pull that out of there to make it a little bit more clean. With watercolor, it's a little bit tricky sometimes to lift some colors. But usually the lighter the color, the easier the color will lift out. So I'm going to try doing that. If I get some in the hair, that's okay. It's going to be more of the goldeny colors anyway. But I was trying to keep a little room to be adding some more pure colors like bright yellows, bright greens, and the blue, and not have the face color interfere with it. Okay, so now my paper is wet with that first layer. I'm going to pick up some other colors that I have in here that's just mixed on my palette. I've been doing quite a few fall paintings, so I have a lot of these fall colors that are sitting over here on the side of my little paint palette. And that's the fun thing about watercolor, is that even after it dries in your areas, you can still keep on using it. I'm adding a little shadow area, so I'm popping around the outside of his face, inside of the little pumpkin twirly thing. And I'm adding where there might be a darker shadow. So I'm focusing at underneath the hat. I'm going to focus on one side of the nose. So I'm going to choose the right side to be a darker shade. Now, when you're laying this color in, if the colors aren't kind of melding together or slowly blending, you can always rinse your brush off, give it a squeeze, and then kind of soften those areas to get those colors to move and see if they will soften together. But the Arches watercolor paper usually works fairly well to do that. So I'm going to let that dry. Now, to do the next area, I need to bump down and do an area that's not touching my face, because wherever the areas are, if I were to do my blue hat, the blue color would mix down into my face and create like a green color. So I want to do an area that's not touching the face because it's wet. I'm going to bop down and do the pumpkin part of the pumpkin pie. I really do enjoy kind of the serendipity quality of that. This is a pumpkin pie in the shape of a pumpkin. I'm using the bright color, and it's called cadmium, cadmium yellow medium. And it's very much a translucenty, bright color. And I'm just adding that color to my pumpkin, and then I'll be layering the next colors over the top. So I'm just putting it on my dry paper in those areas, and then I'll come back in with another color, and I'll focus mostly on the ribs and creating a shadow area in my pumpkin. Now, if you want, you can leave some bright whites of your paper showing through in the pumpkin to give it a brighter highlight. That's where you're going to get your true bright white highlights, is by leaving the white of the paper. I'm not so much focusing on that, but if you wanted to, you can, and then just use a color or leave some open spaces if you want to. Okay, I'm going to mix a little bit of the next color down, the Indian yellow, with this color, and I'm going to focus a little bit on the edges. And because my paper is wet, that color should tend to go towards the centers of those areas. Okay, now my colors, if they're not moving very well, again, I can go in, clean water, rinse it out, give it a squeeze, and then lightly tickle this area. And you can see how the colors will start blending towards the plain water. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, and then my next colors that I will use on there is going to be more of a dirtier shade of orange. I'll be mixing a little brown and burnt siennas in there to give some more depth to this picture. Well, I'm going to speed the video film up, but it's basically all the same steps. It's very much like a color book style, where I'm going to be filling in and adding the shadows. When you're painting watercolor, you are basically painting the shadows, and it's all about the layering. So take your time, put your layers on, and get your depth that way. So let's go ahead and speed this up, and we'll watch the next steps. My face has had a little bit of time to dry, so I'm going to go back up and strengthen the shadows there. I'm mixing a little bit of yellow ochre and some of that burnt sienna color, creating a warmer shadow. I'm going to do the same steps. I'm going to add the shadows to the underneath that hat area, around the face, and to that side of the nose. Again, I'm doing the same steps by taking some clean water and just softening those lines and letting that color blend from dark to light. That's what's going to give it that really great blended look, by adding a little bit of clean water to that and softening those shadow lines. After working on the face, again, I'm going to bump back down to my pumpkin. This time I'm decided to go ahead and make the pumpkin slices that are on the right-hand side to create the shadow line on the right-hand side. I wanted that look of more dimension, like that pumpkin was going around. So the pieces on the left side have the shadow on the left side. The pieces on the right, the shadow is over there. And then the middle one has shadows pretty much all the way around. That's just going to help give this pumpkin more shape and look like it's curving around. I'm doing the same steps, adding the color on. I've added a little bit of the burnt sienna to my orange and dirtied it up and made it a little bit more brown to get that depth that I'm looking for. I need to bump down one more space since my pumpkin is still wet. I'm going to go down and work a little bit on that pie pan, and I chose the color Parazio. I don't even know if that's right. Red ochre. It's just kind of more a little bit of a red color that has some white in it, I think. I put a color of it all over it, and then added a little bit more of the burnt sienna into that color to darken up the shadow area. I put the shadow on the end of the pans and then underneath the pie crust. Now I'm going to go ahead and start working on that hat, and this is where I'm going to be using some of my tube paint. I used the tube paint because I had a little bit more variety of colors. I had some white, so I could make these really pretty shades of teal, and adding that color of the blue, the Payne's gray in with it. It just looks really, it's really a pretty shade to add the teals and those Payne's grays. So that's why I was using my tube paint. But use whatever you want to. I was just choosing to use this. I'm going to be starting out light again and then working my way dark. I felt okay that my face had dried fairly well so my colors wouldn't blend down into that area. If you feel like you need to have your face dry a little bit more so your colors don't drag down in there, give yourself a little bit of extra dry time, or just do the upper part of his hat and leave that next area open. But again, I'm doing the same thing, starting light and then working my way dark. I have a little bit of a darker teal that I mixed. I'm going to use that color on each side of the band of the hat, and then underneath where that hat is curving underneath, because that's going to be darker, the front of his band will be lighter. If you need to add a little lighter color or feeling there to the front of your band, you can always rinse your brush out with some clean water, give it a squeeze, and then lift a little bit of the color. It'll look lighter without looking white. I'm going to be painting around my bird. I'm going to try to paint around those little leaves that are inside of his hat because I want to make them golden in color, and I want that paper to be white underneath there. I'm going to go down to his shirt now and work on that area as well. I'm doing the collar. It's the same colors that I used up on his hat. I like bringing my colors around my paintings. It just helps for more of a unified look, and it just brings the paintings together if you can use some of that paint someplace else. So with the golden of his hair, that little golden colors in the pumpkin and in the nose and on the hat of the little grasses, that's going to tie that area together too. So having the blue on his hat and on his shirt, it's just going to make more of a unified and a nice composition for this painting. For his shirt, I switched my colors of blue. I'm using some Payne's Gray. I love this color. If you watch me paint, you know I love this color. I'm mixing a little bit of Payne's Gray plus a little bit of Prussian blue together to make a little bit of a brighter blue. I'm going to need some contrast in where his arms are. Needs to be a little lighter than what the body of his shirt is. So it looks like there's two different pieces. If I make them all the same tone where one is not darker, it's just going to look like one piece of fabric all the way across. So by making that part of the inside where the body of his shirt is slightly darker and the arms lighter, you're going to get a look of that there's two different pieces there. Here you can kind of see how the inside is a little bit different shade of blue on his body, and then the arms are slightly different. I took that shirt color, and that's the color that I made the band across his hat, and I used those same colors for the patch on his hat as well. Again, I'm trying to mix it up a little bit, so I'm carrying that same shade of blue up a little higher in my painting. I had felt that the front part of my hat had dried enough that I could go ahead and start layering in the straw colors for my hair on my little scarecrow. I start with that bright shade of yellow, the cadmium yellow medium. So hard to say. Anyway, I start with that color first, and then I layer in a little bit of the Indian yellow, which is more of an orange color. I add a little bit of yellow ochre, and in the end, I add just a tiny bit of the burnt sienna too. Now, these are all very small little strokes of color. Use the brush that feels most comfortable to create these little small areas. I'm switching here and using that number 8 long round. I've been talking about that brush a little bit on my channel, and I really do enjoy having that brush. I'm going to have some links to the majority of things that I'm using today. You might be interested. If you're interested in checking them out, check in there. They are Amazon links. I do receive a very small commission if you were to buy something from a link, but it's no extra charge to you. At this point, I'm going to start adding a little eye details. So I'm using that smaller round brush, and I'm going to start with that brighter blue, that mix of Prussian blue and Payne's blue to the top of his eye. I've already done a little small area of the darker brown color, burnt brown, around his eye. That's just going to soften because that burnt brown is already wet. When I put that blue on there, it should kind of soften into the blue. And on the bottom, I'm using the color Hooker's Green and adding that color there. All my colors are wet, so they're going to kind of tend to blend into one another. Now to add some darker areas, and I want to do it while it's wet, I'm going to take my Payne's Gray just straight from the pan of my block color there, the little pan color, mixing it pretty thick. My brush is just wet, and I'm picking some color up there, and I'm going to just do little taps of color at that base of that eye around the lash line. That's going to help create that really pretty dark eye. And because that area is wet, those colors should kind of just blend together. I'm using the same colors that I used on the straw for the straw hair. I'm using those same colors for the nose. I'm going to use my little small brush now because the shirt is dry, my face is dry, to go ahead and do that pumpkin stem. I forget what the official name of that is. It's some kind of weird name. Peduncle? Is that what it's called? You'll have to let me know in the comments if you really know what the real name of it is. I always just call it a pumpkin stem. I'm using my small little brush again to do those little small areas. If you feel more confident using a marker, you could use a marker in this area too. My eyes have had a little bit more time to dry, so I can see how my colors are changing. Watercolor always dries slightly lighter, so you may have to go back and tweak these a little bit more. But I'm thinking it's looking pretty cute. My pie dish has had plenty of time to dry, so I go back in and add another layer of darkness in there as well. Once I felt my eyes had dried a fair amount, I went ahead and added the little cheeks on there. I love this part. I love this whimsical look that these cheeks can get on these little characters. And the Arches 100% cotton watercolor paper is one of the best to create this blended cheek look. I mixed a little bit of a red color, about the consistency of tea, no darker or thicker than coffee. You want to put the bands of the colors on the outside of the cheeks there. Then go ahead and rinse your brush out with some clean water. Give it a little bit of a squeeze, and then again do that clean water trick of where you're kind of just tickling that edge, bringing that color to that clear water. And this is going to create the cutest cheek ever. For the pie crust color, I just watered down some yellow ochre, started the painting process, and then to warm it up a little bit, I added in a few layers of the burnt sienna color to make it look like it was a little bit more toasted. For the smile, I ended up using some burnt brown color, watered down quite a bit, and then I used my long 8 round to create this. You could do your smile always in a micron pen if you feel more confident doing those small little lines that way. I'm also using a little bit more of that liner color, the burnt brown, around his eyes. I wanted to create a really kind of a dark feel for those eyes. I'm also going to use that brush and add a few little bit of line work around his nose. Again, you could do this all with a marker if you felt more confident using a marker. I was going to be using the micron pens and also my jelly roll pen in the white to create most of the white lines. I did use a little bit of the Uniball Signo pen as well, but I'm creating little irregular marks around my painting, and I'm just capturing a little bit of line work. I like irregular lines, so I'm going to be doing stops and starts and dashes and line work that's not perfect. I've noticed by using this, the watercolor paper, the Arches watercolor paper, because it doesn't have a lot of sizing in it, it seems to be a little bit more dry. It has a little bit more rough texture than what it normally does on my Canson paper. So my pens work differently. For all the lettering up above, I used a 05 for that particular lettering and just did on the downstrokes, I thickened up my lettering. I just found that that larger nib size worked better on the paper to create the lettering. And I'm using the 01 and just creating these irregular line work. You could always bump up to a 03 if you feel like you need a little bit more help with creating the line work if you're using the Arches 100% watercolor paper. 100% cotton watercolor paper. I always say that wrong. For the white, I decided to use the Jelly Roll pen. Mostly I like using this Jelly Roll white pen because of the small little tip on the end. I like that smaller point. The Uniball pen has a really nice opaque white, but the end is a little bit thicker. So sometimes when I'm doing these smaller paintings, I like having that smaller tip. And the Jelly Roll pen works okay for that. You may not get as bright as white as you do with the Uniball, but you will get a smaller dot. And I did go back in and add a little bit more detail to my eyes and in my hat using the brighter white in the Uniball pen too. I added a few freckles this time using the micron pen. I'm still out on how I would like to add freckles. If I want to use my stylus dipped in my watercolor paint, or if I want to just use my pen, I don't know. I'm still figuring that part out. For the background on this piece, I created it after my pen work. If you're going to do it this way, you need to make sure your pen work is completely dry. Otherwise, it will smear. So you need to make sure your micron pens are completely dry and then they'll be permanent before you do that next adding the watercolor step. On this particular one, I added water to my background where I wanted that color to be, just to see if it would help flow my colors a little bit more evenly, and it did. So by adding some water to the background and then putting the watercolor on top, I got more of an even blend to my background. I'm still using irregular brush strokes and not necessarily covering it completely. I wanted to see if I could get a little bit smoother color, and that's a way you can do it, by adding clear water first and then putting your watercolor on top. This is a good example to show of how much your watercolor colors can actually go much lighter as they dry. You can notice how my background has really changed and become a lot lighter as it's dried. I'm going to come in more and add a little bit more darkness to my eyes. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of scribbly bits of black in there. I'm going to be adding a little bit more of the Payne's blue color on the top of his eye. I'm okay if my pen bleeds a little bit inside of there, just to kind of soften that area. But I want that dark, rich color by the lash lines on the outside of his eye. And I'm leaving just a little bit of the brighter blue feel to the right-hand side of each of the eye. Well, let's see what this little guy looks like sitting in my studio with the rest of the little fall characters we have painted so far. And here's the beginning of our fall collection. I love these whimsical characters. These scarecrows are so darling, and that cute little witch in the background is cute as can be. And those pumpkins are so pretty. If you're new to my channel and you like doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. And if you too like to paint, but you don't like to draw necessarily, check out my sketchbook membership. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It really can help my channel grow. Well, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again. And perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.